There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" And so the point of this story is that, we're in water. And we're so used to the water, we're so encompassed in the water that we don't even know that we don't notice it. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Well, how does this apply? I mean, there's a topic that we can get into about appreciating life, and that's the water that you're in, and you can just be not appreciative of it. But I was thinking about it from a different perspective, and we've talked about before on this podcast, and you probably heard me say this before, the best way to beat someone in a game is if they don't even know that they're playing the game. That's the best way to beat someone, right? They don't even know that it's happening, and you're outmaneuvering them because they don't know what's happening, and then you beat them. I mean, it'd be like, imagine you're pre-jiu-jitsu, like you didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu, and you got into a fight with someone, and they were doing things you don't even know what they're doing. I mean, they're getting the mount. You don't even know what that is. So it's not, you're just beating them. They don't even know what's happening. So the best way to win a competition is for the opponent to not know that there is a competition. Sun Tzu, we haven't had Sun Tzu on this podcast. He's been dead for a while. But, he talked about the goal is to win without fighting. Right? To win without fighting. We don't even want to fight. This is also the indirect approach, right? I don't want to go head to head. So, several months ago, I was talking to one of my friends, and someone that I spend time with and talk to, not all the time, but fairly regularly. And we were talking through some of his trials and tribulations. And I started talking about the game. And maybe it was the way that I was referencing it or the way I said it. And I talked about it. Look, in Leadership Strategy and Tactics, I talk about playing the game, which is a very specific reference to playing the game in a work environment, interacting with other people. But when I was talking to this friend of mine, I was talking about the game. He was going through some stuff. And I was talking about the game. And as I'm watching his face, as I'm talking about the game that he's engaged in, I realized he didn't know he was in a game. Just like the fish not realizing they're in the water. So there's things going on in his life. There's things going on with his work. There's things going on with his marriage. And there's maneuvers being made. And I can see him because he's telling me what they are. He's telling me, but he doesn't realize that those are moves. And I looked at him, I said, like, hey, you realize that this is a game, right? And he just gave me that blank stare, and I realized, no, he didn't know this was a game. And over the last several months, I've had a bunch of conversations, not a bunch, but I've had several, we'll say, conversations like this. And I realized that a lot of people don't get this idea of the game that they're in. So I wanted to spend some time talking about this because I think a lot of people don't realize. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're in a game and that there is a game. In fact, there's multiple games going on and they're in them. You're in them. I'm in them. So if you don't realize that you're in a game, you're not going to win. You things are happening and you're not going to win. You have to recognize that you're in a game, and you actually have to recognize that you're in multiple games. Well, remember a long time ago we had a conversation about ecosystems, right? That there's different ecosystems in the world. Yeah. I actually had this conversation with Andrew Huberman recently, talking about the ecosystem. He's in the ecosystem of academia. Yeah. He's a professor at Stanford. Mm-hmm. He's got a lab, like really impressive to some people. Yeah. There's some people that literally do not know where Stanford is. Yeah. There's some people that don't care what kind of schooling you went to. There's jiu-jitsu ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm a purple belt. I'm a brown belt. There's people that don't understand that to them a black belt in jiu-jitsu is the same as a black belt in karate. They just like whatever, right? There's ecosystems at work. The SEAL teams is an ecosystem. Mm-hmm. There are different guys in there. They're trying to maneuver, trying to get to the top of that pyramid of the ecosystem. And so there's all these ecosystems, and in those there's games, right? There's games that are being played. There's work games. There's relationships. There's financial games. You're in a financial game. There's fitness. There's a status game. There's a materialistic game. There's all these games are going in, and all those are going on, and all those are like subordinate games that are going on in your life. Mm-hmm. Possibly. You might not care about them. Mm-hmm. You might not be playing one of those games. That's okay. You might not be playing the jiu-jitsu game. You don't care about jiu-jitsu. You might not be playing the financial game. That's okay. But you might be. You might be playing some of those subordinate games. And then there's the supreme game that you are playing, which is life. Which is life viewed as a game. Now, there's sort of a diminishing tone, right, to say that something's a game, right? There's a diminishing tone. Because guess what else is a game? Tic-tac-toe. Yeah. Right, tic-tac-toe is a game. Chutes and ladders is a game.
Sure, yeah,
right?
It is.
So sometimes I've said this before. This isn't a game, right? I've said that before in certain contexts. Like, hey, this isn't a game. So now I'm sitting here saying everything's a game. But what we're talking, I'm not trying to devalue, I'm not trying to diminish, I'm not trying to depreciate life. And I'm not trying to devalue, depreciate, or diminish some of these like relationship games. Yeah. Like, oh, it's a game to you? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. But it depends on the definition that you're going to use. And I actually looked around and see if there was another better word, but there actually isn't.
Yeah.
There's just multiple definitions. Yes, a game can be tic-tac-toe. Yes, game can be chutes and ladders. Yes, game can be football game. And to compare, people get mad, compare football to like combat. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing? That's not combat. And it's true. Mm-hmm. So you can't say, and I'm not trying to take everything and compare it to chutes and ladders. No. Or what's the candy game? Maybe that was chutes and ladders.
Candy Crush.
No, Candyland.
Candyland.
I forget. There's another game, Candyland. That was like up there with chutes and ladders when I was a kid.
Okay.
So you could take that definition, this sort of frivolous game that you play for fun, but there's some definition of game that means you've got a competition based on rules where you're trying to score points or earn value in order to beat an opponent. That's a game. Which, again, that's what combat is the most serious of games. And that's what it is. It's a game. There's rules. We're trying to maneuver. We're trying to follow the rules while we beat the opponent. It's competition. And if you think about life, it's similar. Because in life, guess what? There's rules. Mm-hmm.